that sensei who arrives just in time to save the protagonist's life, and this character sometimes also becomes even more famous and popular than most of the main cast. Sorry, Chad. Sorry, Ishida. Sorry, Orihime. And you might be thinking of a certain white-haired sensei like Kakashi or Satoru freaking Gojo, but there's another undisputed GOAT we love to call sensei, Kisuke Urahara.
This right here is my favorite thing.
A wacky genius banished to the human realm.
I'm banishing you to the Shadow Realm.
No!
That's right! One of the 1,000-year Blood War arc's biggest revelation is that this nerdy, goofy, sexy old man is actually one of the most broken characters in Bleach, even more than we witnessed earlier. So let's go deep into all of his powers, including his insane Zanpakutō and Bankai, which is most definitely amongst the top 10 strongest in Bleach. The first time we actually even caught a glimpse of Urahara's overwhelming power was when he intervened in Ichigo's fight against Yami in chapter 193. Before this, Urahara had certainly given off the impression that he is way much more than just a candy shop owner, where in reality he was so strong to even agree to take on a newly awakened Shinigami Ichigo. And bruh, he totally destroyed Ichigo despite being at a disadvantage against his massive big black sword. Anyways, all this was just the tip of the iceberg, as we quickly learned that Urahara is an excellent swordsman. His blade is cleverly disguised as the cane Urahara carries around, which even threw Ichigo off. What's surprising is that despite only relying on his Shikai for the most part, Urahara is still a fearsome swordsman. He is extremely quick and precise, as you saw against his little clash with Ichigo. With his Shikai alone, Urahara has two special attacks. The first one is the Shito Nagaishi.
What'd you call me?
I'm gonna get cancelled, bro. The first one is Shito Nagaishi, which Urahara used in chapter 57 to pin down Ichigo. It subdues and immobilizes his opponents on the ground using coercion alone. As for the second attack, Hozori, a slashing technique that allows Urahara to leave superficial wounds on his opponents, but his sword wielding is undoubtedly fueled by his own skills and sheer physical prowess, which is no surprise since he was not just part of the second division of Gotei 13, but was also a close friend of none other than Yoruichi. In fact, there's quite an impressive history behind Urahara, as we later learn. He is one of the most fearsome and formidable Shinigami in Soul Society. But to understand why, let's rewind back into the past. Urahara began as the third seat of the second division. Growing up with Yoruichi, they used to practice with each other on the same training ground, similar to the one he now has under his shop. He was so brilliant that Yoruichi gave him special privileges. Hey, I mean for the right reasons, because Urahara was also appointed as the commander of Maggot's Nest, the detention center for the Stealth Force, which housed the most dangerous people who are threats to Soul Society. And when Squad 12 had an opening for captain, Yoruichi personally recommended Urahara, and as expected, he aced the captain exam, bagging the position. Urahara had an eccentric upbringing that is more than apparent in his demeanor, but his closeness with the Stealth Force ingrained extremely high physical skills into him. Every Soul Reaper in the current timeline acknowledges Urahara's skill and Ryatsu level because they are nothing short of extraordinary. As a former captain of Gotei 13, it's no surprise that Urahara has Ryatsu that shocked Michibane and Hisagi. Mind you, both of them have solid powers themselves, but still notes that Urahara is simply on a different level.
No, he's fucking good.
That motherfucker don't miss, man.
He's good.
Plus, although it wasn't common knowledge that he had Bankai, characters like Renji and others expected he did due to being a captain once, but not relying on it often, Urahara kept it a secret, highlighting how overpowered he is. He's just built different.
That's why he's the GOAT!
Even in the turn back the pendulum arc, we come to know that just how different his attitude and actual powers are. As Hiyori, childish tantrum resulted in her tasting the killer speed Urahara boasted. Like, my guy just woke up and chose violence that day, literally almost ending Hiyori's career. His level of power is so evident that he doesn't even need to use his sword. Yes, through his mastery over Hakuda, or simply speaking, hand-to-hand combat. When Urahara visited the detention unit along with Hiyori, the vice captain, he had to engage in a battle with an inmate. This is when he revealed that he had purposely not allowed Hiyori to carry a Zanpakuto as it wasn't permitted, and since he was an ex-commander of the detention unit, he had always been fully proficient with unarmed battles to subdue the inmates within. Moreover, since being a childhood friend to Yorichi, she and Urahara had always pushed each other to their limits, making Urahara a master of Shumpo as well. This is no small feat, because not only could he throw off an Ranka like Yami, but also Aizen himself, as shown in chapter 402. But that's not the most impressive thing about him. As much as he's proficient with the blade and his hands, Urahara is just as much of an expert with using Kido. Yes, he can use high-level Bakudo and Hado spells, something that most Soul Reapers struggle with. In the anime, he could even break through the barriers of noble families, which even captains couldn't do. In fact, his skills rivals that of Aizen, as both of them could cast the majority of spells without even using an incantation. Urahara also didn't have any problems using high-level spells back to back at insane speeds. He also knew which spells would hold back Aizen, showcasing his in-depth strategic knowledge, and even overpowers his opponent's keen observation of spells. Urahara pushed Aizen so much that he admitted without the presence of the Hogyoku in him, Urahara would have defeated him with the impressive chains of spells he used. Moreover, Urahara can also proficiently heal people using Kaido, as we saw multiple times with Ichigo. Now, Urahara being skillful at nearly every aspect of being a Soul Reaper can certainly be attributed to his insane high IQ and intellect. This is proved by his multiple innovations in both Soul Society and the human realm. This is even highlighted through his successor, Mayuri, who was recruited by Urahara himself, not even being close in competing with him, even when it came to inventions. Urahara was simply the best and irreplaceable. After all, he was the one who founded the Soul Society's Shinigami Research and Development Institute, since he realized there was a need for a branch dedicated solely on development of technology. Urahara came up with some super genius inventions that changed Soul Society's working forever. Yes, the very object that pushed Bleach's story into motion. The Hogyoku itself is an invention of Urahara. This orb was earlier intended to be the bridge between Hollows and Shinigami's powers, but according to Aizen in chapter 401, its true ability was to materialize the inner desires of people around it. Though Urahara created a second version of it, together combined with the one Aizen had created, it made the one and only true Hogyoku, which allowed Aizen to literally become insanely powerful later on in the series. But that's just one amongst his crazy conceptions, as one of his most known and important inventions is the Gigai, or a faux body that Shinigamis could use to physically exist and interact in the human realm. Like Rukia used in the early chapters, even Kon is an example of a Gigai, although a defective one, mind you. Urahara also invented a portable Gigai that could be used as a decoy in combat by taking the exact shape and form of the person using it. Basically, he created his own version of Shadow Clone no Jutsu.
There's no doubt that Ichigo achieving his Bankai in 3 days was a goated moment, but Urahara is actually the mastermind behind the process as well. He is one of the few people who achieved his Bankai in this very way. Even at the cost of endangering a Shinigami's life, this process cuts down years worth of hardship for them. With his creations like the Tenkai Ketchu, which protected Karakura town, or the anti-Hiero armor, and even the holographic communicator. Urahara pushed communication and battle development to its max. He even created restoration hot springs, an imitation of blood hell and white bone ponds from the lair of Tenjiro Kirinji, who is the first officer of Squad Zero. Urahara recreated them because they have excellent healing properties. But two of his most crucial inventions are the anti-holification vaccine and the Shinyaku. When Soul Reapers like Shinji, Hiyori, and others turned into scapegoats for Aizen's experiments, rapidly turning into hollows, Urahara helped them to retain their identity and sense of self. Using the anti-holification vaccine, it helped them not cross over to the hollow side and turn them into Vizards with powers of both Soul Reaper and Hollow. And in the 1000-year Blood War arc, the Sternwitters completely threw off the Gotei 13 by striking them where it hurt the most, their Bankai. Yep, that's right, yhwach had data on every Shinigami's Bankai and the technology to not seal but totally take away their Bankai for the Quincy's to use themselves. Against such a confounding power, even the strongest Shinigami were no match. After all, Bankai is the biggest asset for them. But in this dire situation, Urahara rose up to the occasion to create the Shinyaku. They were pills that had a bit of hollow element in them that turned a user into a hollow temporarily. This also impacted their Bankai, in turn poisoning the Quincy's who were using them. Safe to say, Urahara saved everyone's asses with this high intellect. In fact, he is so clever that he can be compared to Aizen because they both are geniuses who could upturn the Soul Society if they wanted to. Judging from how his motives for rescuing Rukia were quite selfish, Urahara could have very well been the big bad wolf in sheep's clothing. With his intellect and everything, even in the Fullbringer arc, my man Ichigo thought Urahara betrayed him. Like, Urahara understand. Remember when he stabbed Ichigo? And Ichigo's like, wait, why are they stabbing me? But no, Urahara is a good guy. He's top tier, bro. However, thankfully, all his impressive inventions and strategies only helped Soul Society and Ichigo's gang in one way or another. And talking about impressive, there's no way such a fascinating man would not have an equally broken Zanpakuto and Bankai. Urahara's Zanpakuto is called Benihime, which means Crimson Princess, and is one of the few Zanpakutos with a female spirit. Usually, Benihime is in its cane form, but when Urahara was the captain of the 12th squad, he used to carry it as a standard katana type Zanpakuto. Even as a cane, Benihime had a blade, and its end was stamped with a skull that could separate someone's soul from their body, as he did for Ichigo. The Shikai command of Benihime is Okiro, or Wake Up, which turns the Zanpakuto into a sleek and medium-sized sword. Benihime's primary means of attack as the special ability is a burst of crimson-colored energy that can be used for different techniques. The first attack is when Urahara chants Nake Benihime, which leads to the Zanpakuto shooting volatile bursts of energy, as he did against Wonder Weiss in chapter 233. This burst follows the swing of the sword and is so powerful that it took on Yami Seto at point blank range. In the same clash, Urahara used another ability of Benihime called Chikasumi no Tate, used with the Nake incantation itself. This spell creates a hexagonal barrier that is immensely powerful because it completely tanked Yami's direct punch and without any damage to itself or Urahara. Now that shit's badass, bro. When he entered with that shit, oh my god, I was up on my seat. Moreover, this shield is powerful enough to have survived Ichigo's first uncontrolled Getsuga Tensho. Urahara admitted that without the shield, he would have definitely lost an arm against Ichigo's attack. Urahara's next technique is Kamisori Benihime, which fires a burst of energy that can cut through objects. In chapter 233, Urahara quite easily cut down Luffy's Hiero-infused tentacle, which is insane because Hiero is like an Arankar steel-like skin, making it hard to deal damage to their body. Another way in which Urahara uses Benihime is through his Supane Benihime technique. Given the kind of genius he is, Urahara can analyze a technique's reishi composition and the subject's muscle movements when they use it. This allows him to use Supane to interject with his opponent and totally nullify it if he had seen it in action once, as he did against Yami in chapter 235. Lastly, Urahara can also use Shibari Benihime, an attack that releases condensed energy in the form of a blood net over the opponent to trap them and restrict their movements. An extension of this technique is Hyasobi Benihime Juzu Tsunage. In this technique, Urahara stabs the net from Shibari, create fire orbs outside the net that explode one by one in massive blasts, harming the opponent fatally. Urahara's Shikai itself having so many varied and strong abilities is more than enough explanation on why he mostly relies on it while fighting. But he also has an extremely goated Bankai that might easily be one of the top 10, no, top 3 probably in the entire series, and it's called Hanobiraki Benihime Aratame. In fact, Urahara so rarely uses his Bankai that even yhwach didn't have any data on it to provide to the Stern Ridders. But bro, what's with these Squad 10 captains having eerie real people as their Bankai? Cause Urahara's Bankai looks like a giant woman with braided hair wearing a red dress. But weird as this Bankai's appearance is, it's just as powerful. This Bankai has the power to alter the very fabric of objects it touches to restructure them for attack, defense, and support. As long as an object or entity is in range of Urahara's Bankai, it can be cut down completely and stitched back, like he did against Askin, a Stern Ridder. Askin had taken out Urahara's eyes with his gift ring, but using his Bankai, Urahara stitched them back as a temporary replacement of healing. Urahara even went as far as chopping off his own arm and sewing it back together to increase its strength many times by restructuring it. This restructured arm was strong enough for Urahara to violently throw Askin off with one swing of his sword. As long as Benihime's Bankai is present, Urahara can keep fighting his opponents even at the cost of his body parts by fixing them as he fights. And when needed, he can also restructure his opponent's body if they are in the Bankai's range. This dude is too OP. There is, however, a shortcoming of his Bankai because all the effects are null and void outside its range and objects return to their original state. Moreover, these effects are only temporary and exist as long as the Bankai isn't called back or defeated, which means in a prolonged fight, Urahara will have to expend a lot of energy maintaining Benihime's Bankai. These are perhaps a few more reasons as to why Urahara prefers to use his Shikai far more than his Bankai, as it is literally his last resort. Even in the fight against Askin, it was the last thing. But coupled with all the other abilities that Urahara has and his keenly strategic mind, he is definitely a force to be reckoned with because he very carefully uses the resources at his disposal and fuck shit up. However, this makes us wonder if we have truly seen the full potential of Urahara's Bankai or if he was holding back as he let Grimjow take over this fight. There's a chance we could see his Bankai again in the Breaths of Hell arc in the future, but until then, check out our video on Kenpachi's true Zanpakuto and Bankai that turns him into an even scarier monster. He's literally a demon, bro.